Transforming Trauma, Unit 7. A workshop presentation developed by Dr. Julian Watchwan on behalf of the Foster and Kinship Carers Association of Tasmania. This workshop received support from the Sydney Myer Fund. In Unit 7 of this series of workshops, we'll explore the practice framework developed by the Australian Childhood Foundation. This model provides a way to organise responses to children that will, over time, help establish an effective relational environment that addresses their experiences. The practice environment aims to foster a sense of predictability in children's routines, connect children to relationships with peers and adults who are supportive and consistent, keep children calm, build children's memory and cognitive functions as a way of them understanding their experiences of abuse and the effects of it, contain and influence children's behaviour associated with fear, anger, shame and disconnection, and support children to shape their emotional reactions. Practice is an acronym for the 8 specific areas we will focus on in assisting children to find a place of calm within themselves and their environment and to feel safe. The practice framework provides a way to organise responses to traumatised children that will over time establish an effective relational environment that addresses their experiences. 1. Predictable. Building an environment that is familiar as possible and feels safe. 2. Responsive. Responses to children's behaviour should always stem from an understanding of the trauma-based origins of the behaviour. 3. Attuned. The more attuned or tuned in to the child's patterns and processes of responding, the better we're able to understand them and help them understand their own reactions. 4. Connecting. Implementing strategies that build emotional literacy and allow children to experience and recognise pleasure and success will improve the child's ability to interact. 5. Translating. Children who've experienced trauma struggle to build stories of understanding because of the impacts of trauma. These children need a translator to assist the process of recalling and remembering. 6. Involving. Children who've experienced trauma often struggle with relationships with their peers. Yet these relationships can be the source of healing and nurturing when developed and supported. 7. Calming. To facilitate positive outcomes for these children at all levels, educationally, socially, emotionally, and behaviourally, we need to provide and support experiences of calm on a consistent and repetitive basis. Engaging. The experience of appropriate, supportive adult-child relationships is instrumental to supporting children who've experienced abuse-related trauma. In this session, we'll look at the first 2 environment factors, 1. Predictable, and 2. Responsive. Predictable environment. Create environments that have routine and are predictable and prepare traumatised children for change. The principles behind this are traumatised children experience change to routines and their environment as a potential threat. The familiar is safer for traumatised children than the unfamiliar, even if the familiar is difficult and destructive. It's important to foster predictability. Strategies. Build a reliable framework of activity that comes to be experienced as familiar over time. Always prepare the child for what's coming up next. Establish a supportive pattern of one-to-one communication with a traumatised child that explains the immediate and short-term future. Be particularly sensitive to transition periods, both large and small. This might include end of school year or the beginning of a new school year, beginning and end of the day, transitions to the car for a trip. Other ideas. Set daily and weekly timetables that are available to traumatised children in ways they understand. So for younger people, build a visual timetable. Give 5-minute warnings when activities are about to end. Think about the method of giving that warning. Is it threatening for a hypervigilant child? Outcomes. Traumatised children will come to trust and rely on their carer as the interpreter of their environment. Traumatised children will respond in a less volatile way to changes. Over time, traumatised children will build an internal platform for responding to change. And traumatised children will learn to use others as a resource to support them. Element 2, responsive environment. Respond to traumatised children with the understanding that their past trauma will guide present behaviours, cognitions, and emotions. Principles. Traumatised children will display behaviour which is experienced as difficult or challenging by others, but often makes sense in the context of their trauma. Traumatised children find it hard to internalise external rules and consequences. The misbehaviour of traumatised children evokes secondary reactions in others which are experienced as threats. In turn, traumatised children play out familiar patterns of responses that aim to minimise the threat. Strategies. Understand the meaning and the purpose of the behaviour. Sanction misbehaviour but stay connected with the child. Separate the child from the behaviour. Reinforce rules in times of low stress using neutral emotional tone. Provide time in rather than time out procedures. The crucial element in responding to behaviour is to ensure that the relationship is maintained throughout the response process and that the way we go about it does not elevate the child's internal alarm states. Other ideas: track, record, acknowledge examples of when the child abides by the rules. After an issue has been resolved, go back to traumatised children and talk it through with them, again positively to reinforce the rules. Outcome. Traumatised children experience the present as different from the past. They feel personal exchanges are reaffirming of themselves. Traumatised children are less likely to overreact to limit setting, and they are more likely to maintain and access rules in working memory. Traumatised children will learn that they will be treated differently when they misbehave by people who support them. Traumatised children will experience adults as affirming, consistent and helpful, and over time traumatised children's behaviour will adjust to expectations. When implementing responsive strategies, be aware of questions that form part of a restorative approach have some value, but may need to be modified for traumatised children. You may need to process examples of positive behaviour as much as you would difficult behaviours. You'll need to send a clear message that the behaviour is not okay or really positive, and a clear articulation of what will happen as a result. Questions you might ask: what do you remember happening? You may need just provide a summary of the event, as the child may literally not remember. What did you do? This is a helpful question, but be mindful that they may not remember what they did, as they possibly did not encode the memory of the situation, nor access thinking processes to give them the language required to explain the event. How did you feel when this was happening? This is a helpful question. To be more specific, you could add, how did you feel in your body, and how did you feel in your head? How do you think the other child might have felt? This is a helpful question, but may need to provide concrete examples, as children may struggle with empathy. Why did you do that? Avoid asking this question, as it's generally not helpful.